Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News, South Florida Conservative News Service. It is Saturday, March 14th, 1:13 p.m. We're going to talk a little bit more about Iran because that's what there is to talk about. First of all, we had just done the video about why you shouldn't attack Karg Island, and Donald Trump has bombed Karg Island. But he only bombed the military installations, meaning there are a lot of dead Iraqis amongst the crushed concrete. So now the island is defenseless itself to U.S. attack, but the U.S. may not attack and probably will not attack. So it's a very strange neutrality based on the fact that they would have to start moving more of their scarce ballistic launching systems around on the mainland to shell the island, which nobody wants to have done. But while all this was going on, you Morrissey fans out there realize that the supreme leader is in a coma. As far as we have heard from the Israelis specifically, because they're the ones that probably put him there, the current supreme leader, son of the last supreme leader, is supposedly unconscious somewhere, missing a leg, and in a dreamlike state. While this is going on, the IRGC, on the other hand, is free to run rampant in the countryside. So today we are going to talk about one of the most unusual, dangerous, what would we say, unusual, potentially dangerous strategic situations in the Middle East right now. Something that sounds almost absurd at first, but when you think about it, it may actually make Iran more dangerous than it was before. The situation is this. Iran may now have a supreme leader, as we've said, who is technically alive, but effectively out of the fight. So reports from several security sources suggest that the man who succeeded Iran's longtime ruler, Mojtaba Khamenei, which is the son of Ali Khamenei, survived the same bombing that killed his father, but he was badly injured, hence the leg and the coma. According to some analysts, he is hospitalized and not actively directing the war. In other words, the Islamic Republic may now have, actually that, may now have a supreme leader who isn't actually running the country. And in fact, they may have an Islamic Republic leader who was put in the position of supreme leader knowing that he was in a whatever coma vegetative state. Kind of dirty for the IRGC. Now, most people would assume that would weaken Iran, but strategically, the opposite may be true, and we'll explain to you why. First, it's important to understand what the supreme leader actually does in Iran's system. It is not just managing an extensive real estate portfolio in the city of London. The supreme leader sits at the very top of the political and military structure. He appoints the senior commanders. He sets the strategic direction of the state. He hates the Jews. And most importantly, he is the final authority on escalation. Look at our old video, which said that he could never surrender because he can't. But that's a story for another day. In a normal situation, if a military, and this is not in this Islamic situation that we have in Iran, a normal situation, if a military commander wants to take a major action, launch missiles, Navy confrontation, proxy attack, there is ultimately one person whose approval matters, and that is this supreme leader. But if the supreme leader is alive yet incapacitated, that system gets very murky very quick. And this is where the real power center of Iran becomes important, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, as we call them. The IRGC is not just a military force, it is an economic empire, it's a political faction, and a strategic command structure all rolled into one. We discussed why it was hard to deal with the missile launches when they had tiers and tiers of fanaticism woven into a lot of these commands. And the IRGC is not the conventional military, it is a parallel military and security force that is to coup-proof the Iranian government. So IRGC controls the Iranian missile system. It controls the drone programs. They oversee the proxy networks of Hezbollah and Hamas, Islamic Brotherhood, all those guys. and they ran the naval harassment operation in the Persian Gulf, which is why when you saw that we sank every Navy ship, they came after you with those little Boston whalers, right? The Boston whalers are owned by the IRGC. All the natural reefs that we've just built are the Iranian Navy. More importantly, or most importantly, the IRGC has spent decades preparing for a scenario where the leadership of Iran might be targeted or killed because they're always expecting to fight the Israelis. And guess what? They got what they wanted, right? This isn't hypothetical for them. They have anticipated and expected it. So they designed their military doctrine around something called decentralized execution. You can look up the term. That means operational units have standing directives. Plans are approved ahead of time. Commanders in the field can act without waiting for daily instructions from Tehran. The system is built to survive decapitation strikes, which is what we've inflicted day in and day out on the Iranian government. So if the supreme leader is wounded and not actively directing events, the IRGC doesn't stop, it keeps going. And here's the key political twist. Those commanders can always claim they are acting under the supreme leader's strategic guidance. The last thing that he put out, supposedly, was something that was handwritten and somebody else's voice. You know what I mean? It's one of those deals. It's much the same way that Joe, I'm not going to, we'll leave the Mormons alone, but you know how they got their holy books. Anyway, if he isn't actually issuing orders, this creates a very convenient situation for the military leadership where they can escalate, which they are doing, and later say it was the leader's will that this goes on. Now, let's talk about what this matters for the global situation, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important checkpoints in the world. Roughly one-fifth of the planet's oil supply normally passes through that narrow stretch of water. Iran's naval strategy there is not about conventional naval battles. It is about harassment and disruption. These little boats, naval mines, which you keep hearing about, drone swarms, anti-ship missiles, these tactics are designed to create uncertainty and fear in global shipping. And it has, because if you see G Captain, which seems to have gotten Trump derangement syndrome, and even what's going on in shipping, who is normally good but seems to not want to talk about the strategic, even tactical ramifications of what they're discussing, that's fine. But always remember, as we say, the British decided to ramp up the war against the Americans by cutting off insurance to shipping. They did that. And then they also had the secondary insurers, which were also English, cut that off again. And while we're discussing that, so I don't have to do a whole other video, it is probably true that France and Italy are negotiating transport of their ships through the Gulf of Hormuz, which means they're going to have to pay the Iranians either in cash, what is it? Gas, grass, or ass, nobody rides for free. Somewhere in there is going to be the French and Italian government, which is why that French aircraft carrier is moving along. Dare they make a power play against the Americans? It would be about time that we dealt with them, right? So that's that. But as we said, the tactics that we're dealing with here, which create this uncertainty and fear in global shipping, and the thing about those tactics, as he said, that does not require a single centralized command order, and in a situation where we don't even know if the supreme leader is making the decisions, nor do any of the subservient ranks, and a regional commander operating under standard directives can initiate an operation that triggers global consequences. If they decide to blast Karg Island, let's say, the Americans have already destroyed the bases that were there. If they decide that they are going to burn it before we get it, the ramifications, look at our other video on it, are worldwide and ghastly. Now, granted, these guys are almost Stone Age savages as it is, but they're no Taliban. They like to go to Paris on the weekend. This will really F that whole thing up. But that's like I said, there is a paradox here. A strong leader can sometimes restrain the system. A weak or absent leader removes the brakes. in this particular case. There is another factor at play here as well, which is internal power competition. When a regime like this loses its central figure, different factions begin to move around and maneuver for influence. Inside Iran, that competition often happens inside the security apparatus itself. Direct commanders may try to prove their revolutionary cred. They may escalate operations to demonstrate loyalty or strength. That can make the entire system more volatile. It also makes it harder for you to try to negotiate a surrender on the side when Ahmed may decide to come by on the orders of the supreme leader and shoot you in the head. That can make the entire system more volatile. Foreign governments trying to negotiate de-escalation may not even know who actually controls those decisions, which is why it doesn't make sense that they're doing what they're doing. Is it the clerical leadership? Is it the Revolutionary Guard Command? Is it the Supreme National Security Council? Or is it the local commander in the Gulf trying to fill up a bunch of suitcases full of rubles so he can blast off out before the whole place comes down? That uncertainty increases the risk of miscalculation on all sides. And this leads up to the central takeaway from this strange situation. Most Western strategic thinking assumes that eliminating the authoritarian leaders weakens the hostile regimes. In many cases, that's true. But Iran is very different. Once again, read Harold Rhodes's book. Do I have it here? Read Harold Rhodes's book, Modern Islamic Warfare, or any of the videos that you may see on YouTube where he discusses how Iran actually thinks. They are a bit different than the regular Arabs, but it's all kind of the same, right? The Islamic Republic spent 40 years building a system designed to survive leadership assassinations. That's how much paranoia they've been operating under. The power is distributed, operations are desensitized, decentralized, the authority is layered. So if the supreme leader is alive but incapacitated, the regime doesn't collapse. Instead, the clerical structure becomes a symbolic shell, and the military security apparatus becomes the real engine of the state, which is what I think we're up against now. In effect, Iran begins to resemble something closer to a revolutionary military government operating behind religious legitimacy. And that kind of system can be very unpredictable, especially as different powers, as we said, are vying for supremacy. Because when no single figure is clearly in charge, the incentives inside the regime push towards escalation rather than restraint. These guys don't have a job if they surrender, and more than likely will be killed by somebody if they surrender, meaning their own people. Which means the uncomfortable strategic truth may be this, that this Mullah in the coma, as we say, could be more dangerous than having him alive and in command. So that's what we have for today's episode. Found this analysis useful. Share the program, like, subscribe. We are on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Substack, and www.southfloridaconservative.com. Thank you for watching, and we will be back soon. Goodbye.